They didn't see a doctor. They saw a black man standing in the wrong lobby, and that was enough. The security guard's hand was already on his radio before the doors finished closing behind him. The woman at the front desk had already looked down at her computer screen, the way people look down when they've decided something without saying it out loud. And the man in the charcoal suit who'd been watching from across the marble floor, the one with the plastic smile and the name tag that said Assistant Manager, Lakeshore Grand Hotel. He was already walking over with that particular stride, not fast enough to seem urgent, slow enough to seem in control. What happened in the next 4 minutes cost Lakeshore Grand everything: the lawsuit, the investigation, the national coverage, the congressional testimony. All of it started in a hotel lobby on a Wednesday afternoon in April, with a man who hadn't done a single thing wrong except exist in a place where someone had decided he didn't belong. But before we get to that, let me take you back to the beginning. Caldwell, Mississippi. Population 11,200. 2 stoplights, 1 community college, 3 churches within walking distance of each other, and 1 hotel that called itself a destination. The Lakeshore Grand sat at the edge of Caldwell's man-made reservoir, 17 stories of glass and steel that the Chamber of Commerce used on every brochure, every billboard, every tourism campaign that tried to convince the world that Caldwell had arrived somewhere worth visiting. The hotel's GM was a man named Preston Harwick, 51 years old, Ole Miss graduate, class of 1995. He'd been running the Lakeshore Grand for 9 years, and in 9 years he had built something he was quietly, constantly proud of. Occupancy rates above regional average. Trip Advisor rating, 4.6. A bar program that won a hospitality award 2 years running. A staff that smiled on cue and dressed the part and knew, without ever being told directly, exactly the kind of establishment this was supposed to be, and exactly the kind of guest it was supposed to attract. The security guard's name was Darren Tullis, 28, 3 years on the property. He'd been hired for his size more than his judgment, and in 3 years nobody had given him reason to question that arrangement. He stood 6'3", 240, and when Preston Harwick walked past him in the mornings, Harwick nodded at him, the way a man nods at a tool that's doing exactly what it was purchased to do. The front desk supervisor was a woman named Claire Eddington, 43, meticulous, the kind of employee who memorized the names of returning guests and kept a printed list of VIP arrivals in her left blazer pocket every morning. She was good at her job. She was also very good at reading the room, specifically at reading Preston Harwick's room. After 9 years of watching him, she understood without a single written policy exactly what he expected from her. None of them knew what was about to walk through those doors. Dr. Wallace Gideon Thorne stepped out of a black sedan at 2:47 in the afternoon, a rolling carry-on in one hand and a phone pressed to his ear with the other. 61 years old. Tall, with the kind of posture that came not from vanity but from decades of standing at operating tables for 6, 7, 8 hours at a stretch. His suit was charcoal. His shoes were plain black lace-ups, scuffed at the toe. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. The stubble came in gray and white. He looked tired in the way that people look tired when they've been working across 3 time zones and haven't had a full night of sleep since Tuesday. He was on the phone with his chief resident, talking through a post-op complication on a patient he'd handed off that morning before catching a flight. He wasn't thinking about the hotel. He wasn't thinking about the lobby or the desk or the man watching him from 40 feet away. He was thinking about a 73-year-old man in a hospital bed in Memphis who had a bleeding irregularity following a valve repair and whether the drain placement needed revisiting before morning rounds. What nobody in the Lakeshore Grand could see, what nothing about Wallace Gideon Thorne's stubble or his carry-on or his slightly wrinkled suit would ever tell you, was the 31 years he had spent inside cardiothoracic surgery. Chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Vanderbilt University Medical Center since 2014. Before that, 15 years at Johns Hopkins. Before that, Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons, top of his class. He had operated on sitting senators and professional athletes and a former Secretary of State. He had testified before the Senate Help Committee on cardiac care disparities in rural communities. He had received the American College of Surgeons Distinguished Service Award in 2021. He had also grown up 50 miles from Caldwell, in a town that didn't have a hotel at all. He was here for a 3-day cardiology symposium hosted by Caldwell Regional Medical Center. The Lakeshore Grand was the official symposium hotel. His reservation had been made 6 weeks in advance by his assistant, Marta, who had sent confirmation emails to both the symposium coordinator and the hotel directly. The confirmation number was GX4471B. He didn't take his jacket off in the car. He didn't plan to be here long. Check in, drop the bag, 45 minutes of quiet before the welcome dinner. He pushed through the glass door. The lobby was the kind of lobby that had been designed by someone who had looked at photographs of nicer lobbies and tried to approximate the feeling without quite understanding the source of it. High ceilings, marble floor, real but cold. A chandelier that was slightly too large for the space. Flower arrangement at the center console, fresh, replaced every 48 hours on a schedule. Thorne stepped inside, still on the phone. His carry-on rolled behind him across the marble. A small mechanical sound in a large, quiet room. Darren Tullis saw him from the security station near the east wall. Looked at him the way he'd been trained to look, which was the way Preston Harwick looked, which was a look that had never been written down anywhere, but was understood by everyone who worked there. He reached for his radio. Held it without keying it yet. Watched. Claire Eddington looked up from the front desk. Saw the carry-on, saw the suit wrinkled, saw the face she didn't recognize. Her eyes moved to Darren Tullis. A micro-exchange, less than a second, the kind of communication that doesn't require words because it's been rehearsed without ever being practiced. She looked back down at her screen. Thorne ended his call as he reached the desk. Tell Morrison to keep an eye on the drain output every 2 hours, not 4. Call me if the numbers change at all. He slipped the phone into his breast pocket and set both hands flat on the counter. Good afternoon. I have a reservation. Name is Thorne. Thorn. Claire Eddington did not look up immediately. She finished something on her screen that didn't need finishing. It was a 3-second pause, the kind that is never accidental. Then she looked up, and the smile she gave was the one she reserved for a specific category of interaction. Not warm, not cold. Calibrated. Do you have a confirmation number? Thorne gave her the number, GX4471B. She typed it. Her eyes moved across the screen. Her expression didn't change. And what's the nature of your stay? Thorne looked at her. The symposium at the Regional Medical Center. 3 nights. We do have a block for that event. She paused. Could I see some identification? A reasonable question at check-in. Thorne had been asked it before at every hotel in every city. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. Handed over his Tennessee driver's license and his Vanderbilt Medical Center faculty ID, both at once, out of habit, because both were in the same sleeve. Eddington took them, looked at the driver's license first. Then she looked at the faculty ID. Something moved across her face and disappeared quickly. She set the cards on the counter, didn't hand them back yet, and picked up her desk phone. 1 moment. She dialed internally. The call lasted 40 seconds. She said 4 words that Thorne could hear. I have a situation. Then she listened, said yes twice, and hung up. Preston Harwick appeared from the back corridor in 90 seconds. He walked toward the desk with the stride of a man who managed problems, which was how he thought of this, Nost. A problem. Good afternoon. Harwick's voice was the voice he used for things that weren't good afternoons. I'm the general manager. Is there something I can help you with? I'd like to check in. Thorne said it simply. Of course. Harwick folded his hands. We just want to make sure everything is in order. Do you have a credit card to hold the reservation? Thorne had already given his information to secure the booking. He said so. Harwick nodded in the way of a man who is not registering what he's being told because he has already decided what the situation is. We've had some issues with block reservations being shared. He said it carefully, like it was an explanation and not an insult. The lobby was not empty. A couple near the elevator bank had stopped pretending to look at their phones. 2 women near the concierge desk had gone quiet. A teenage boy with his parents at the seating area near the window was watching with the open attention that adults learn to disguise, and children haven't yet. Thorne looked at Harwick, at Claire Eddington, who was now looking at her keyboard, at Darren Tullis, who had moved 3 steps closer to the desk without appearing to move at all. He said, I have a confirmed reservation. I gave you the confirmation number. I gave you my driver's license and my faculty ID. I am a registered attendee of the Cardiology Symposium, and I am a paying guest of this hotel. Is there a specific reason you are declining to check me in? Harwick's expression didn't change. We're not declining anything. We're simply verifying. What are you verifying? Harwick said nothing to that. just held the folded hands and the managed expression, and in the silence that followed, Darren Tullis stepped forward. "Sir, I need to ask you to step aside from the desk." Thorne turned to look at him. "Am I being asked to leave? We're asking you to step aside while we confirm the reservation. You have the confirmation number. You have 2 forms of identification. What exactly is not confirmed?" Tullis reached for Thorne's arm. Thorne looked down at the hand on his arm, then he looked up at Tullis. Then he looked at Preston Harwick. He said very quietly, "Don't touch me." The lobby had gone still. Not just quiet. Still, the couple by the elevator. The 2 women at the concierge desk. The teenage boy by the window. Every person in that marble room had stopped. Harwick stepped forward, his voice dropping to the register men use when they want to sound reasonable and don't feel it. "We don't want any trouble here." Thorne looked at him for a long moment, the same steady, unreadable look he used in operating rooms when an intern made an error, not anger. Something older than anger and more durable. He said, "I'm going to need you to say clearly, so that everyone in this lobby can hear you, what the specific reason is for refusing to process a confirmed reservation with valid identification." Harwick said nothing. "Because I want to understand," Thorne continued, his voice not raised, not sharp, just absolutely precise, whether this is a policy that applies to all guests or a policy that applies to me specifically. The woman at the concierge desk had her phone out now. She wasn't hiding it. Harwick's jaw moved. "I'm not refusing anything. I'm asking you to wait while we verify. I've been waiting for 11 minutes, Thorne said. "I gave you everything you asked for. You made a phone call. Your manager appeared. Your security officer put his hand on me. And the word you keep using is verify. So I'm asking one more time. What are you verifying?" Harwick had no answer that wasn't an admission. Every word available to him either said the quiet part loud or collapsed his own position. The folder of excuses he'd been reaching into had run empty. His ego wouldn't let him stop. It never had. So he did what men like him do when the ground disappears. He looked at Tullis and nodded. Tullis stepped forward again, and something fell from Thorne's breast pocket as he shifted his weight. Not a badge, not credentials, a lanyard. A conference badge from the Caldwell Regional Medical Center Cardiology Symposium, printed that morning, that had been tucked halfway into his pocket since he'd picked up his registration packet from the symposium coordinator in the parking lot 20 minutes earlier before coming directly to the hotel. The badge hit the marble floor and landed face up. A photograph. His name printed large. His title, larger. Dr. Wallace G. Thorne, M.D., Fax, FAA Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery, Vanderbilt University Medical Center, keynote speaker. Day 1, the teenage boy by the window saw it first. He said nothing, just stared. The woman with her phone out walked forward. She bent down, picked up the badge. Read it. Looked at Preston Harwick, looked at Thorne, looked back at Harwick. And she held her phone up and kept recording. Harwick looked at the badge in her hands. He read it. Once, then again, as if the second reading might produce a different result. The blood drained from his face in a way that made him look less like a man and more like a wall losing its plaster. The folder he'd been stacking his confidence inside for 9 years had just caught fire in the middle of his lobby. Thorne looked at him, then at Tullis, then at Claire Eddington, who was staring at her keyboard like it contained a way out of this room. "My name is Wallace Gideon Thorne." He said it without theater, without volume, without anything except the weight of 31 years behind it. "I am the keynote speaker for the symposium you have an official accommodation contract with. I am a confirmed guest of this hotel, and what has happened in the last 13 minutes will be documented in full." He picked up his driver's license and his faculty ID from the counter where they'd been sitting since Eddington put them down. "I would like to check in now." The woman with the phone stepped closer. She said, "I got all of it, every second." And she wasn't talking to Thorne. She was talking to Harwick. Nobody moved first. That was the thing. For a full 30 seconds after Thorne finished speaking, the lobby held its breath. Not because nobody knew what to do, because everybody knew what had just happened, and nobody wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Then Harwick moved. He walked toward the desk fast, the way a man walks when the thing he's been running from has just lapped him. His voice had changed completely. The managed smoothness was gone. What was left sounded thin and pressurized, like a tire with a nail in it. "Dr. Thorne, I want to apologize. This was a miscommunication." Thorne said nothing. He picked up his carry-on handle. "Please, if you'll just give us a moment to process. I've given you 14 minutes. Thorne looked at him. I'll be speaking to your corporate office and to the symposium coordinator. You will be hearing from my attorney." He turned toward the elevator bank. Harwick started to follow, a hand on the arm, the same gesture Tullis had used 10 minutes ago. Thorne stopped, did not turn around, said quietly, "Do not put your hand on me again." Harwick's hand dropped. The woman with the phone kept recording. The teenager by the window had his phone out now, too. His father, realizing what was happening, let him. The elevator doors opened. Thorne stepped inside, turned to face the lobby one final time, carry-on handle in hand, conference badge in his breast pocket where it had always been. The doors closed. Preston Harwick stood in the middle of his marble floor with his hands at his sides, and for the first time in 9 years he had absolutely no idea what to do with them. The video was 47 seconds long, shot on a Samsung, clear audio, clear image, clear text on the conference badge. Posted to Twitter at 4:11 p.m. By 6 p.m. it had been viewed 200,000 times. By midnight it had crossed 3 million. By the following morning, the name Lakeshore Grand was trending nationally, paired with words the hotel's PR team spent 48 frantic hours trying to get ahead of. They didn't get ahead of it. The symposium coordinator, a woman named Dr. Beverly Achilles, pulled the Lakeshore Grand's contract that Thursday morning. In a statement released before noon, she called what happened a profound violation of the trust and dignity owed to every attending physician and to every human being. The symposium moved its official accommodation block to the Caldwell Marriott effective immediately. 67 room nights, gone. The woman who had picked up the badge was a retired schoolteacher named Miriam Calloway. 68 years old, from Decatur, Alabama, in Caldwell visiting her sister. She gave 2 television interviews. In the second one, a reporter asked her why she walked toward the badge instead of staying back. She said, "I taught 32 years. I know exactly what a child looks like when someone tells them they don't belong somewhere they have every right to be. I just didn't expect to see it in a hotel lobby in a grown man who was clearly somebody important. And then I thought, why does it only matter because he's important? It was wrong before I picked up that badge. It was wrong the second he walked through the door." Thorne himself gave no interviews. Not to the local stations that called Vanderbilt's communications office 6 times between Thursday and Saturday. Not to the national outlets that reached his personal assistant through channels she had to block one by one. Not to the podcast that offered him 45 minutes of prime airtime and an audience of 2 million subscribers. He submitted a formal complaint to Lakeshore Grand's corporate parent, Pinnacle Hospitality Group, through his legal counsel. The complaint was 41 pages. It documented the interaction in precise sequence, timed to the minute, referencing the hotel's own security camera system, which had captured every second from 3 separate angles. It also named Preston Harwick, Claire Eddington, and Darren Tullis individually. Pinnacle Hospitality Group's internal review lasted 11 days. On the 12th day, they released a statement. Preston Harwick was no longer employed by Lakeshore Grand or any Pinnacle property. Effective immediately. Claire Eddington was placed on administrative leave pending further review, which in corporate language meant the same thing with a longer runway. Tullis was terminated separately, quietly, on a Friday afternoon, in a meeting that lasted 6 minutes. The statement called what happened inconsistent with Pinnacle's values and commitment to every guest. It announced a company-wide training initiative, a third-party audit of guest services practices across all 83 properties, and a financial settlement, the terms of which were not disclosed, with Dr. Wallace Gideon Thorne. The Tennessee State Legislature's Judiciary Committee opened a hearing 4 weeks later, not about one hotel, about a pattern. 18 complaints filed with the State Human Rights Commission over the past 3 years, all describing nearly identical experiences. Hotels, restaurants, retail locations, financial institutions, black professionals. Confirmed reservations declined. Accounts flagged without cause. Services withheld. Questions demanded. Exit suggested. Hands placed on shoulders, arms, wrists. Different details. Identical bones. Thorne testified on a Tuesday morning. He arrived at the state capitol building in the same suit he'd been wearing in the video. Not as a statement. Just because it was the suit he wore when he had somewhere important to be. He sat before the committee and described, in the same precise sequence he'd given his attorneys, what had happened in the lobby of the Lakeshore Grand. He didn't perform it. He didn't modulate his voice for effect. He laid facts down the way he'd been laying facts down for 31 years. One at a time, level in the correct order, impossible to knock down. A state senator asked him what he wanted people to take from what happened to him. Thorne was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been asked that question a few different ways over the last month, and I keep coming back to the same answer, which is that I don't think what happened to me is the point. I was a keynote speaker. I had a faculty ID and a confirmation number and a conference badge. I had 31 years of credentials and a legal team and a retired school teacher with a phone. Most people who walk into that lobby and get treated the way I was treated don't have any of those things. And they still deserve to be treated differently. The point isn't who I turned out to be. The point is how any person should be treated before anybody knows who they are." He paused. The room was very quiet. "The entire interaction," he said, "from the moment I walked through the door to the moment the elevator closed, was 13 minutes and 40 seconds. That's how long it took for that hotel to tell me I didn't belong there. I want people to understand that those 13 minutes didn't begin when they saw a black man. They began the second that man walked in the door. It didn't matter what I was carrying. It didn't matter what I was wearing. It didn't matter what I knew or what I'd done or where I'd come from. They had already made a decision before I reached the desk. Everything after that was just the execution of a decision that was already made. The legislation that came out of the hearings wasn't named after Thorne. He requested that specifically through his attorneys before the bills was introduced. It mandated bias training and complaint documentation protocols for all licensed hospitality businesses operating in the state. It created a public reporting portal for accommodation discrimination complaints. It established penalty tiers for documented violations. It passed 61 to 32. The Lakeshore Grand itself stayed open. New management, new training materials. New general manager, a 44-year-old woman who'd spent 15 years in hospitality operations and who in her first week replaced the oversized chandelier with better lighting, moved the security station away from the entrance and removed the photograph of the old GM from the corridor outside the back office where it had been hanging for 9 years. She also sent a handwritten letter to Dr. Beverly Achilles requesting that the symposium consider returning to the property. Dr. Achilles sent a handwritten letter back. She said yes, on the condition that the first thing new guests saw when they walked through the lobby doors was a printed statement of the hotel's accommodation policies. Visible, permanent, not framed behind the front desk where staff could see it. In the lobby, where anyone walking through the door could read it before they reached the counter. The sign went up on a Thursday. Miriam Calloway heard about it and said, "Good." Then she said something a reporter wrote down and couldn't stop thinking about for weeks afterward. She said, "You know what I keep thinking about? I keep thinking about all the people who walked through that door and didn't have a conference badge fall out of their pocket, and nobody picked up a phone for them, and they just left and went home and never said a word because who was going to believe them? Those people are the reason the sign matters. Not Dr. Thorne. He's fine, those people. The ones whose names we'll never know. Thorne was back in an operating room by the following Monday, 7 a.m. A 68-year-old man with a calcified aortic valve that had been quietly narrowing his world for 6 years. The chief resident asked him, before they scrubbed in, if he was doing okay. After everything, Thorne looked at the resident for a moment. The same steady look. He said, "There's a man on that table who came a long way to be here today. Let's not keep him waiting." And somewhere in America, on some other Wednesday afternoon, a man like Wallace Gideon Thorne is rolling a carry-on through a glass door into a lobby that has already decided something. And somewhere behind a desk, someone is reaching for a radio. And somewhere in that same room, a person nobody is paying attention to is about to decide whether to look away or pick up the phone. That decision, that single quiet moment, is the one that actually changes things. Not the badge, not the lawsuit, not the legislation. The moment one person decides that what they're watching is wrong and that being a witness is no longer enough.